I'm Jennifer Johnson and I raise sheep for their wool.
Welcome to Whispering Pines Shetland Sheep Farm in western New York State, home to our lovely flock of soft Shetland sheep. We breed and raise our sheep to produce soft, crimpy wool for hand spinners to enjoy. Thank you for liking this video and for subscribing to our channel.
Have you ever wondered how much yarn you can get from 1 ounce of sheep's wool? If you have, let me just tell you, you're not alone. It's one of the most common questions that I get from customers. In this video, I'm going to take 1 ounce of raw wool, and raw means directly from the sheep, hasn't been washed or processed. And then I'm going to show you from washing to drying to flicking, all the way to spinning it into yarn, how many yards and ounces of spun yarn I can get from 1 ounce of fiber from our soft Shetland sheep who have really lovely, crimpy, soft fleeces. So I'm gonna weigh it raw, meaning right from the fleece, and it should be around 1 ounce. I think the sample I have is 1.04, but it's close enough. Then I'm going to run it through my whole cycle of washing as if I were washing a whole fleece. And then we're gonna dry it and then come back to it later on and see what it weighs. Then I'm going to use my process of flicking the locks and then spinning the locks into yarn. I'm gonna explain the importance of coats in this whole process, how they prevent VM, or vegetative matter, which is bits of hay and debris, poo, in the fleece, and the role that plays in, number one, making it much easier to turn into yarn, and number two, prevents you from wasting good fiber during the processing of your fiber. So whether you are looking forward to our upcoming fleece auction, or maybe you have purchased a 1 ounce sample of raw fiber from me in my booth at a festival, in this video I'm going to show you how much yarn you could expect to end up with. Before we get too deep into the 1 ounce challenge, which we're gonna go deep, let me just tell you, I did want to talk about the ewe that gave us the wool for this experiment, and her name is Lucretia. She was born in 2020. That's the year that I used the people that were really key in getting the 19th Amendment passed, because that was the 100th year anniversary of the 19th Voting Rights Amendment.
Lucretia Mott was one of the ones that kicked off the whole movement. She co-organized the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848.
My Lucretia is a really special ewe. So I don't know if you know this, but sheep have personalities. And every one of my sheep, the 65 ewes I have in the flock, all have a very different point of view and way of dealing with what happens to them in their little sheep lives. And Lucretia is really special. So number one is she's really large. She's probably the biggest ewe in our flock, or one of them. And usually that means she's kind of more of a bully, maybe a little more take chargey, kind of more the matriarch of the flock. And she's really not. I mean, she's very laid back, very cool. And she's also really friendly, but not in a needy way. So I've got some ewes that the minute I walk in, they're just like, do you like me? Do you like me? Very attentive. Where Lucretia's friendly, but not every day. You know, she kind of selects when she's going to engage with me, and I just feel like she's coming up to me saying, Jen, you're doing a great job. Thanks for feeding us. And then she just kind of goes and does do whatever her thing is. So she's just really special. And she's got a beautiful fleece. She's 6 years old. We measure our fleeces. So we do this thing where I take a sample, I send it to a lab, and they come back and they give us data, which is pretty much an indicator of what the wool feels like. And specifically what they do is they take the diameter, and a smaller diameter is going to generally provide softer wool, and it's going to feel softer on your skin. So there's one number on that whole chart that we really hone in on. It's called spinning fineness. It's sort of like a composite of a bunch of different factors, and it gives you a good way to compare one sheep to another in your flock. It's called spinning fineness, and it's a fiber diameter. So Lucretia's lamb fleece was 20 microns spinning fineness, which is really nice when you think about cashmere centers around 18 microns and merino centers around 19 to 20. So a 20 micron fleece is pretty great. And it had a really beautiful crimp, still does. and just a really nice handle. When she was 4 years old, which is when I took the 1 ounce sample that we're going to be working with, at 4 years old, she was at, I think it was 22.6 microns. So she went up 2 microns from her lamb fleece 4 years prior, which is not that much. Usually, sheep get coarser as they age. Their wool gets dramatically coarser, and that's why lamb's wool is so prized. But with our flock, we were selecting for ewes who did not, we call it fall off, who did not get coarser as they aged, because I wanted to be able to prize and cherish every year's fleece from our ewes, and we've succeeded. So this year, at 6 years old, Lucretia, she's at, let me see, 24.7. So there's a thing called a prickle factor. So when you're looking at micron data, they say that a 28 micron spinning fineness starts to hit that point where human beings can feel prickliness, and it's not comfortable. So she's well below that threshold, and so that's something that we've really worked hard to achieve, and she's kind of like the epitome of what we are working for. The other thing that makes this sample special is that it was a rood fleece. So the year I put these samples together, I selected one of each color: white, black, brown, fawn, and gray, and wanted to get a good representation of what we're breeding for in our flock. So I took 5 fleeces of wool that was under the coat and made these packets. Lucretia's fleece was a rood fleece. So what that means is, instead of shearing the fleece with clippers, I was able to manually pluck it off of her. And that's because many of the sheep in my flock have this thing called a rise, or a weak spot in their fleece. What happens is in the spring, as the days get longer, there's a hormonal thing that happens which holds back on proteins that get sent out to the hair follicles. And so it's over a period of time, enough that there is a very noticeable weak spot in the fleece where it's not as dense. You can actually see it. It's just kind of like a weak spot in the fleece, and it runs over the whole body. So because of that, you can really kind of just shed the wool with your hand. So for example, this year I was able to do about 30 ewes in this manner, and it's really special. It kind of talks to the heritage of the breed. And the other thing that's really nice about it is that it's the perfect staple, right? So it's right at the beginning of the new growth, right to the end of the old growth, and so it's just kind of really special. It's a really good indication of that particular ewe's fleece. So we're going to start with what's called raw wool. It doesn't mean I didn't cook it yet. What raw wool means is it's right off of the sheep. Usually wool that you get in the store has been washed and processed and gone through all sorts of scouring, chemical cleanses and stuff like that. So what I'm starting with is the raw wool, and the reason I'm doing that and creating this video is I have to do a fleece auction in the spring where I sell probably 55 of the fleeces that are produced by my flock, wool that's under the coat only, so it's all very clean and very nice. And then my hand spinners will take those raw fleeces and wash them and process them and then make them into yarn or felted items or whatever. Other spinners will do this thing called spinning in the grease. So that means they're spinning the fleece without washing it, so it's raw. Now the reason they want to do that, there's a few things. Number one is, if you want to make something that's very water resistant, the raw fleeces are loaded up with the material called Lanolin, and that is a water repellent, one of many things it does, but it's the reason why sheep, their bodies don't get wet when they're in full fleece, when they're out in the rain or the sleet or whatever. So hand spinners will spin in the grease for that reason. Number two is it's really easy to draft because it's got that slip, slidey, greasy lanolin in it. It just is like drafting putty or chewing gum or something. I mean, it's just really smooth and slippery and nice, and there's no static or anything. On the downside of spinning in the grease, there's a couple things. Number one is you're going to leave residue on all of your stuff, all your fiber prep tools, on your guides, on your spinning wheel. And also the grease is a little abrasive, so you're more likely to wear grooves if you've got unprotected guides or any kind of sharp angle spots on your spinning wheel. If they aren't ceramic lined, you're going to see grooves worn in your metal. And it also has a very distinct odor. So, you know, if you think you want to spin in the grease, imagine yourself sitting with that odor for a long time, you know, because it takes a long time to spin a fleece, even the Shetland ones, which are 1 to 2 pounds. If you don't mind that odor, like me, I find it heavenly, then it's fine, but you know, you just want to be aware of that. And your hands are going to get really greasy and dirty when you're spinning in the grease, so you can't, like, you know, stop and check your phone or use the remote or whatever, because there's a lot of stuff on your hands. Raw wool has dirt on it, but it also has this product called lanolin, which is naturally produced by sheep. So they're sebaceous glands, the glands that in human beings produce oil, which give you acne, which that's the reason I know what a sebaceous gland is because I was treated for severe acne when I was a kid. But the sheep's sebaceous glands produce lanolin, and it's a waxy material. They use it for lotions, you know, body creams and care stuff. So that's what it feels like. You know, when I'm rooing a ewe and I've got it on my hands, you can feel it, and my hands are actually probably a lot softer in rooing season than any other time of the year because of that lanolin. And what happens is the lanolin, because it is so sticky, it attracts dirt. So in the barn, you know, there's dust in there, and even if they have coats on, it's going to be able to get into the wool. And I don't coat them all year, right? So I only put the coats on at the end of the summer. So there's time in the summer when just dirt and poo can get on the wool and generate dirt. Now that is completely different from what we call VM, vegetative matter. When you get vegetative matter in your fleece, this is bits of hay or dried poop or any other kind of debris that the sheep encounters. That's difficult to get out. The lanolin and the dirt that sticks to the lanolin, you can wash that out. But the vegetative matter, you need to mechanically remove that with tweezers, with a flicker, with combs or hackles or whatever tools you choose to use. So it's a big difference, and that's why having the coat on the sheep is really great, because I don't put the coats on until I start giving them hay, and that's when you really load up a fleece with bits of dirt that have to be physically removed. And so by putting the coat on there, I eliminate that as an issue for the hand spinners. So the VM adds weight. So I'm selling raw fleeces. If there's VM in there, it's going to put a negligible amount of extra weight on the fleece. But the second piece of it is when you're removing that VM, if you do it with a flicking or a combing process, you're likely to include some good fiber in that waste, because you have to so aggressively flick or comb it to get the bits out. So not having VM in your fleece in the very beginning, at the very start, is always good. So this 1 ounce sample we're doing doesn't have VM in it because it's under the coat, but it does have dirt because it's got lanolin, and the lanolin attracts little bits of dirt that can be washed out. Of course, usually I'm washing a full fleece, so I will use the entire utility tub, fill that with hot soapy water, and like I said, that takes about 5 minutes to get full enough. But I'm not going to be using the utility because I've only got to wash this small quantity of wool. This is the draining rack that I use, so when I'm done with the wash cycle or the rinse cycle, I'll pick up the fleece and I'll set it on this rack, but I don't need something this large. So for this little challenge, what I'm going to use is a Tupperware bowl and a colander for the draining part of it. So I'm gonna get my water hot. Okay, the water's hot. So right now what I'm using is this unscented Tide clothes washing detergent. I did buy some scouring solution from the Central New York Fiber Festival. The girl in the booth right next to me, Heidi, Dirty Girl Wool, was selling this shampoo. So eventually I'm going to try that. But for this one, because I'm about at the end of the bottle here. So I'm just going to put a small dollop of soap in the bowl. Maybe a teaspoon. And then I'm gonna load that with the hot water. I'm gonna use the sprayer just to get a little suds going. It's good enough for the first soak. When I'm doing a full fleece, I put the fleece in this nylon bag. It was a soccer bag. The balls when my kids were in soccer. So it's great because it's really slippy so it doesn't get caught in the fibers. So I'll put the entire fleece in here and then it makes it easy to keep it all in one piece as I'm submerging and removing it from the water. I'm not going to use that either. So I'm just going to take my raw unwashed wool. Now it almost looks yellow, doesn't look like pure white, but once I put it in the soap and comes out just even that first wash, you're going to see an enormous difference. So I'm just going to set it on top of the hot water, and this was hot tap water. The other thing I just wanted to tell you, I keep the sprayer out because it's a really nuisance to put it in and out of the hole. And I use it every time, so I just leave it hanging out. Whatever. All right, now, as I said before, when I'm washing a fleece and I'm submerging it in the water, even then, you don't want to swish it around. You don't want to agitate it. So, pretty gently, you can already see the dirt in the water. There. Just very gently, just set it down into the water. Perfect. And I'm gonna let that soak for 15 minutes. That's my normal soaking time. I usually will set the tub filling and the tub filling at least for 5 minutes, but because obviously this is such a small amount. All right, so let's set the timer. I'm gonna set it for, there's my 15-minute timer. And then when that notifies me that this first soapy wash is done, we'll take it to the next step. Okay, my alarm just went off, so I'm gonna stop it. It's annoying. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dump this wool that's been through one soapy cycle with hot water into my colander gently, and I'm gonna let it set in the colander for usually 5 minutes for a whole fleece. I'm just gonna do 3 minutes for the small amount of 1 ounce wool here.
So I'm watching this during editing, and I'm wondering why I didn't stop right there and just dump that last bit of dirty water in the sink. That's normally what I would do.
But the wool has already got a lot whiter than it was when we first started. So I guess I'll just set it here in the sink, just like that. And now I'm gonna set my timer for 3 minutes. Again, I do this because if I don't, I'll forget about it, and this takes forever if I don't actually set the timer.
So I have it set for 3 minutes to run the soapy water before I put the fiber in the Tupperware bowl for the next soapy soak. So this sat for 3 minutes and that dirty water has drained out, and now it's time for the second soapy soak.
I'm just gonna very gently grab the locks and just set them on top of the soapy water. Gently scrunch them down. This is cleaning up really well. So one thing about me and my fleece processing, I never process my premium fleeces that are under the coats. That all goes to an auction. The stuff that I process, once in a while I might find some neck wool that I'm really enchanted by. So for example, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, there was a ewe in our flock. Her name was Susan, and her neck wool was just amazing. So I had to turn that into something. So I set that aside and I processed that, but that was loaded with VM, right? Last year I got to process a fleece that was under the coat. Her fleece had a ton of second cuts. She didn't shear very well. So I had kind of a lot of waste on the base of the lock, not on the tip, but anyway. So for me, you know, like with Susan's neck wool, there was a lot of dirt in that because it was exposed, it wasn't under the coat. So I may only need to do 2 cycles for this because that's already clear. In fact, I just decided I'm only going to do 2 soapy cycles. So I'm going to leave that in there again, setting my timer for 15 minutes, and I will be back to start the rinse. There's 15. All right, I'll check back. I'm going to start rinsing it now. I know I said 3 soapy soaks, but this is really clean. I mean, if there were still dirt in the water, I would definitely run it again, but I mean, that's really clear. So I'm going to start rinsing. So this is going to go a lot faster than I thought it would.
All right, wait for it, because I did it correctly this time.
Set the
This is
colander
how I would
in.
normally do it. Stop right there. And that dirt
There's
goes
some
in the
dirt
sink.
that was kind of sank to the bottom. So you know, not going to put that back through the wall. This dirt here, what that is that's the tip of the lock. So I don't put the coats on the fleeces, on the sheep, until at the end of the summer. So when they're on the pasture, like right now, they don't have coats on because there's no hay. There's nothing really getting in there. And in fact, like today, we're in the midst of a torrential downpour. Their fleeces are going to get cleaned in that because they usually stay out unless it's really bad. When we start giving them hay, that is when the coats go on before we give them hay, because the hay can just ruin the fleece with all the VM that gets in, really embedded in deep. The dirt that's on my fleeces that have been coated, that get coated like in August, is any stuff that maybe got on them before the coats went on, but it's cleanable and that will flick out really easily. The only downside is so this level of dirt on Lucretia probably would prevent me from running her fleece directly onto the drum carder. I'm gonna have to flick the tips. I'm just gonna go ahead and do the hot rinse now. So I'm just gonna run the hot water in here. No soap. There's probably some soap still on this wool from the last 2 soaps that I did, so this will just be a rinse. That in there. And leave it for 15 minutes. Yeah, see how clear the water is? That's clean. Okay, let's drain this. See if there's anything left on the bottom of the bowl. Not a whole lot, a couple bits. These little things are gonna flick right out. The point about this is that any of these little bits in this dirt here, that's all at the tip. So one swipe of the flicker and that'll all be gone. And it's gonna be gone easy because the tip is usually kind of weaker because it's been exposed to the sun, so it's a little more brittle, and that probably will come off, which is good because you don't want that in your yarn because it's the thing that causes the little pilling and stuff like that. So because I want to get rolling here, I'm just gonna run another hot soap and then I'm gonna spin it. So it's really accelerating the process here. Getting impatient. All right, so this is going to be my last rinse, After this, I'm gonna put it in the washing machine spin cycle for not that long. I'm not gonna go through a full cycle. And then lay it out to dry. So give this 15 minutes and we'll be back. We've gone through 15 seconds, or 15 minutes. 15 seconds, that'd be awesome. We've got clear rinse water. I'm gonna dump this here. Oops. Now, unlike how it was at the beginning, you can see the water is rinsing out clear. There's a couple little specks of dirt in there. But for the most part, it's clean. So now, I'm gonna put it in my washing machine. So, one thing I learned when I was putting this building together was that new washing machines don't allow you to open the lid when they're operating. My old washing machine at the house, I can pick up the lid and kind of keep it, fill the tank up and then keep it from agitating. I can just advance it to the spin cycle. And so what I've learned is new machines don't do that. You can't open the lid and do any kind of manipulating. So I ended up buying an industrial washing machine, which is a lot more expensive. And I've learned it doesn't have, you can't control the amount of water that goes in. So it always does a full tank, which is ridiculous. But again, I can manipulate it, so it's okay. There's a video, one of my friends, Cheryl Wilner, she's now got a mill in the Carolinas, North Carolina, I think. She did a video washing our fleeces and she has a little spinner. That's really cool. So if you don't have the ability to interrupt your cycle in your washing machine, that might be something to look at, and I'll put a link to her video here. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch over to the washing machine, which, why didn't I put the washing machine right next to my utility tub? I don't know. The dryer's right next to the tub. So anyway, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in my washing machine and spin it. It's been 24 hours since I washed the wool and set it down to dry. So it's now dry, quite a bit whiter, and obviously not anywhere near as greasy. It does not have any strong perfume scent, so we're going to get a weight now. So if you remember, it weighed 1.04 ounces raw before we washed it. So now's the big reveal. So this is our first step in the process. We're now at 0.65 ounces. So we lost 40% with the grease coming out of the 1 ounce lock. So now it's time to get it ready to spin, so I need to flick it. That's the way that I'm going to process it.
This is me flicking. I have a leather pad on my knee, and that protects my pants because the tines on the flick comb are very sharp. You can see I have a vice grip on that lock, a vice grip, and that is so that I don't lose good fiber in the flicking waste. That's the waste right there, so that just goes in the garbage. So what I'm doing here is I'm carefully peeling off a lock. You want to keep the locks intact when you're flicking. I always start with the skin side first. No real reason, it's just how I do it. So I know exactly what to expect when it comes time for spinning. Because once I've finished flicking, because of the compression of the lock, it actually looks a little bit like a pyramid, a little bit like a triangle. And then that's how I know how to start drafting that particular lock. And there's the waist. The flicker I'm using is a Magicraft flicker. It's kind of got a different ergonomic setup. Kind of helps my hands. Just prevents strain on my hands. So we're moving along. Those are all the fluffy, poofy, flicked locks. What When I sell wool from my sheep, I take those flicked locks and put them on the drum carder and make 1 ounce bats. But for me, I spin right from those locks. So this particular lock, there's no close-up unfortunately, but it's not as organized. So I have to kind of fiddle with it. Usually with a lock like that, I would put it on my combs, but my combs are over at the house, so I'm having to make do with the flicker. So flicking opens up the fibers so that you can draft, and then it also cleans the wool, takes out all that VM that we've been talking about, and that dirt that might have got itself caught up on the tips. And it's also going to remove the fiber at the tip that's been exposed to the sun that has got the damage. It's going to be really brittle, so this will automatically just remove that. I think I started flicking when I first processed my first fleece, and I was just influenced by a farmer who had Shetland sheep, and she was spinning their wool, and she was actually a weaver, and this is what she told me to do, and I just kind of did what she said.
All right, so the wool is all flicked now. So now I'm going to weigh the beautiful flicked locks that resulted from that 0.65 ounces of washed fiber. And it's a small enough amount that I can fit in the bowl that comes with the scale. So it's at 0 right now, so let's see what we ended up with. So now we're at 0.42 ounces of fiber, so more than half. 0.42. So what I'm going to do is divide this in half, because I'm going to make a 2-ply yarn, because that's what the goal is here. So I'm going to take this to 21, and I'm going to spin 2 singles on 2 different bobbins, and then I'm going to ply those 2 together. So there's 21, and I'm going to put it in a separate bag. So I'm going to put in 2 bags, and then I'm going to spin each of these 21 ounces on a bobbin, ply those together, do a bracelet ply for anything that's left over, and then we're going to see how many yards of yarn I'm going to get from that. And then what I'm going to do is wash that yarn and dry it to remove any additional lanolin that might still be able to come out. And then we will weigh that final skein. I thought I would take advantage of this beautiful sunny day to spin the 0.42 ounces of washed flicked locks from my South Shetland ewe Lucretia. As sort of towards the end of my study of how much yarn you can get with 1 ounce of raw fiber from our Shetland sheep. So I'm spinning by the lock. This is the way I always spin when I make hand spun yarn. I like it because I like the fact that the colors are more emphasized by doing it by the lock as opposed to blending them together on, say, a drum carder, where then you don't get that really the real sharp contrast with the different colors as they go across the body of the ewe. I always spin from the base of the lock, so it's always in the same direction for a couple reasons. Number one is it's a good idea to stay consistent, because I mean, you may not even notice this, but the scales on the fiber go in one direction, and I just feel like it's a good idea to keep them always in the same direction. And then the other reason is because the base of the fiber has a little bit more grease on it, and so I don't like to drag it through towards the dry end. I feel like that gives me more neps. more little pills in the yarn, more texture, which in this case I don't want texture. I want a nice smooth DK / sport weight yarn, which is my go-to. It's usually how my soft Shetland sheep want to be spun. In fact, that's just the way I gravitate. So I'm spinning on my little gem, which is the Magicraft travel wheel. And I'm spinning out in the grass, which I really never do, but it was so pretty out today. I couldn't resist. There's a mat underneath the wheel, under the base of the wheel, and I have that there because I don't want my hinges to get dirty. Because if the hinges get dirty, they start to get squeaky, and they just don't operate as smoothly as you want them to. So that's what that is all about. So what I'm going to do, I ended up with 0.42 ounces of washed flick locks. Split that quantity in half. So I have two batches of 0.21 ounces, and what I'm going to do is spin each of them on a separate bobbin. Then I'll apply those two bobbins together to make a 2-ply yarn, and then we'll take all our measurements to see what we can, how much yarn we can get from 1 ounce of raw wool. I do like to, if it's been a while since I've flicked, they do tend to contract back into their, because it's so crimpy and elastic. So I do like to kind of tug them, open them up a little bit before I start to draft. Not much more left. 1, 2, 6 locks and a little piece of fluff here, but I'm going to spin that because I need to get as much as I can in this. And this one looks like a little short little nub, but I open it up and no more. This is the last lock. So when I get this finished, I am going to go inside and break out another bobbin, do the other half, because it's getting hot out here. And then I will come back and video me plying the two singles together into a 2-ply yarn. That's what 1/2 of 1 ounce of raw wool looks like, washed, flicked, and spun on a Magicraft bobbin. Now I'm ready to ply the 2 singles. So I've got my 2 bobbins, each has about 0.2 ounces loaded on it. So the 2-ply yarn I'm going to make, or I'm going to ply these 2 together, is going to be about 0.42 ounces because there's no loss from the flicking to the spinning step. So I'm going to be plying on the little gem, and I have my delta orifice, again, my delta flyer. When you ply on the little gem, you don't treadle backwards. You don't treadle so that the flyer spins in the opposite direction of your singles, what you do is you flip your drive band. I like to do the lower drive band. You can reverse either one. I prefer the lower drive band because when you reverse the upper drive band, you have to tilt the head in order to prevent the drive band from rubbing against itself. Whereas with the lower, it's really easy. And with the lower drive band, you just rotate the wheel in order to keep that drive band in the groove. That way you're not struggling to stretch it to fit it into the groove. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed my yarn through the flyer. Get my start of my 2 singles. So I just got them held together and I'm just going to graft them on. Just might take up a little. So I'm treadling the same way on the little gem as I do when I'm doing my singles, but because the drive band is reversed, it's going in the counterclockwise direction. So I'm using my Susie, my Magic Craft Susie as a lazy Kate, and that's because I'm plying over here at the new building, the Woolworks, as I'm calling it. My lazy Kate is in the basement of my house where I do a lot of my hand spinning and stuff. But the Susie has this very nice storage bars integral to the wheel, so that's what I'm using it for. So I'm just going to happily ply here. I took a plying class recently and the teacher said in order to have very even tension on both singles, you want to put your lazy Kate behind you so that it's going straight onto your wheel. So that's how I do it now. So 2-ply, the reason you spin 2 singles together is to get a stronger yarn. Singles are stronger than not spinning fiber at all. But having 2 singles twisted together in the opposite direction really gives it the strength that you would want for a knitting, a weaving project, or crocheting. Once again, I'm not getting as much take-up tension, so I'm just going to shift my flyer hook there. Now I've got a little more tension, so it's just another lever. You don't have to always adjust your tension knob. Sometimes you can move your flyer hook. That's with Scotch tension is where you would do that. So I make yarn from my own sheep's wool so much that it's really unusual for me to like stop and check the twist of the ply and stuff. But one thing you can do when you're plying, if you want to just see if you're over twisting it or whatever, or if you're making it really balanced, is just release it. And if it, sometimes you would want it to be very tightly. This is how I like it to appear when I'm plying. In instances where you'd want it to kind of coil up a lot would be if you were making a yarn that you wanted to be really strong. So maybe a sock yarn or the, can never remember which it is, but in weaving, the one that goes up and down on the loom, not the across one. The warp, I think it's called. I find that a gentler ply where it's a little more balanced is nice with my wool because it's very crimpy and elastic. And so if I like to let the wool itself create the property of the yarn, if that makes sense. So I don't try to induce anything by any techniques that make it more whatever, crimpy, strong, soft, resilient, whatever. I just kind of let the wool do the talking, if that makes sense. So I'm coming to the end of those 2 bobbins, and they're not gonna finish up exactly at the same time. Probably. Would it be crazy if it did? Yes. It'd be very unlikely for me to finish plying and have both bobbins fully emptied at the same time. Normally, one bobbin has a little bit more yarn on it, and so then that's when I'm going to be doing my bracelet plying that I just learned in my plying class. I'll show you that as we get to the end of one bobbin, and the other bobbin still has spun singles on it. So I should have kept track of, or done a better job of keeping track of how long it takes to do this, because I get that question all the time as well. But I suppose I started at like 1 o'clock, and it's right around 4. So we could say it took me, let's just say 2 hours, because there was a lot of setup time and everything. So 2 hours to spin 0.42 ounces of singles and then plying them. So the flicking didn't take that long either. When I think back, it probably took me about 45 minutes to flick that whole stack of wool. Oh, we're getting there. Okay, so you can see, I can't believe it. I'm actually going to end. I'm not going to have to do the bracelet plying because I'm going to end exactly in the same spot. Oh, that's crazy. Actually, it's a good thing I had fuchsia on the one bobbin and then more of a natural brown on the other one. But they both ended at about the same spot. So that's the fuchsia one. This never happened. I can't believe it. And there's a little bit of the fawn left on the end of this skein, or strand. What do you think about that? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a skein by taking this 2-ply onto my Niddy Noddy. So we'll do that next. All right, so the next step, and not the last step, believe it or not, is we're going to wind off the yarn, the 2-ply yarn, from the bobbin onto this tool, which is called a Niddy Noddy. 2 words, it's a silly name. I don't know where it comes from. And what you do is, it's designed so that these 2 extensions here, you can just angle your wrist and you can go around the arms. And so you start on the lower arm, you bring it up around the top arm, then you go back down around the bottom yarn, around the top yarn, and then back here. And that's the full length of the skein. I do it fairly tight just because I don't want this yarn to fall off. And if you're doing it right, you shouldn't have to move your hand. You should be able to just kind of tilt your wrist to get it to wind correctly. All right, so we're gonna do that now. I'm gonna just keep the bobbin right on my wheel. I've released the tension cord and the flyer is still on there so that the bobbin doesn't slip off. So I'm just gonna find the end of the yarn, make a slip knot, put that slip knot on the arm there. Now I've already lied because apparently I start at the top. So it's gonna go around the bottom, around this other side of the top, the other side of the bottom, and then back to the beginning. And that's 1 loop. And my hand never leaves the Niddy Noddy, so that's a 2nd loop. And the yarn is fairly tight on the Niddy Noddy. So you go over the 4 extensions, and that's how you're going to get that beautiful loop of a skein. Now I'm going to get going. I wanted to do it slowly so you could sort of see. Now I'm going to go a little faster. A little bit tedious. You can also use, I've got a skeiner that you can do the same thing with. This is just, I use the Niddy Noddy, especially on small quantities. If it was a big skein, I would probably use the skeiner.
So unfortunately, I misplaced another piece of footage where I show you how I tie off the skein from the Niddy Noddy. I'm going to put a link here to a short that I created last winter doing that very thing. So if you need to see how I do it, go ahead and check out that video.
I always tie them in slip knots because I always think about future Jen, how much she's going to appreciate that when it comes time to work with this yarn, this skein. So when I take this off the Niddy Noddy, what I don't want to see, I don't want to see it like coil up with all sorts of twisty bits and stuff. I kind of want it to look just kind of relaxed. So hopefully that'll be the indicator that I applied it the way I meant to. And this is not really necessary, but I'm going to trim all the loose ends off of my knots. The reason I do that is because usually I sell my hand spun, and so I like it to look really neat and tidy for the new owner of the yarn, person that's taking it home with them. So yeah, there's a big reveal moment coming up here where I'm going to take the skein off the Niddy Noddy and just hope that it's nice and relaxed and not super twisted. Slide that slip knot off. Yes. Not so pretty. So visually, this is what you get from 1 ounce of raw wool. So the next step is I'm going to wash it, dry it. We'll probably lose a very small amount of weight, just any more lanolin that's still in here. And then we'll do all the measuring. All right, so I'm a little disgusted with myself right now as I'm getting ready to wash my little skein because look what I just found. 1 lock that I didn't include. I can't believe it. This is just my life. All right, so I'm really tempted to spin this and add it to, I probably will. I'm not going to video that piece of it, but I will spin this and then ply it quick and just get a length. Unbelievable. So because this is such a small quantity, I'm going to go ahead and use my little tiny bowl and an eensy weensy beansy bit of soap, and I'm going to go with my unscented Tide again. And just a drop, literally. I'm waiting for it to come out because this is almost empty. There we go. That was probably too much. Run the water till it gets hot. I do agitate my yarns ever so slightly, not a lot, but just a little, just to irritate it a little bit. So I'll spray the yarn with the sprayer. Just a little. So we'll just leave that. All right, I'm going to take you with me. I'm going to weigh this stupid little bit. See how much it is. Okay, so there's that little piece. Let's turn the scale on. Always a good idea. Get it to 0. .03. I'm totally gonna add that. So I'm gonna go work on this right now. So while I am washing and rinsing the yarn I made, I actually took that little smidgen of wool I found on the scale that was part of this experiment, and I flick carded it and spun it yesterday. So it was 0.03 ounces. Here it is now, spun as a single on the bobbin, and I'm going to do the Andean or bracelet plying that I had thought I might have to do with the original batch, but it ended up matching exactly. So I'm going to get this on my hand, make the bracelet part, and then I'm going to ply this and then add the yardage and the weight to the finished. And it seems like it's a really tiny bit, but I think it's also going to be interesting to see how many yards of yarn can you get just from that one little 0.03 ounce tuft. Oh, so it's already done. I was going to show you how I was doing it. So here I have it on my hand, and so what I'm going to do is remove the loop that goes around the middle finger, and there's the bracelet, and then I'm going to take the two ends and that will be how I'm going to ply. So let's get that set up here. All I need to do is set the tension cord. I've already turned the drive band around on my gem. And I have the Delta flyer on here, so it's super easy to load, which is good because my hand's kind of busy keeping the twist with my singles. So I'm going to have the flyer rotate to the left because I'm plying. And I'm just sort of manipulating my hand so that the singles come off it fairly even. Well, that was quick, and that's the end of it. I mean, it's probably going to be 3 yards. So, I mean, for this small of an amount, that much makes a difference. So I'm just going to wash that and see where I end up. All right, so the yarn is finished soaking. So I'm going to take it out of the bowl. Both skeins, and a little tiny one. Then it goes in the washing machine. Now I'm going to set it to spin. I'm going to let that spin. And then when it's done, I'm going to whack it and hang it to dry. Finished spinning in the washing machine. Although I seem to have misplaced, oh there it is. My itty bitty couple of yards of yarn. But here it is, having been washed in soapy water, just a soaked in a hot rinse, and then spun it out in the washing machine, the spin cycle. And then I'm just gonna do this thwacking thing. I'm not really sure why we do this. I think it's about just helping to get the twist sort of consistent and distributed, but I also notice when I do this on dirtier yarn, bits and pieces start falling out, so that's always good. All right, so I'm going to hang this to dry. I'm just going to hang it inside here because it's raining outside. Here's my tiny little spinchen of a tiny little bit of yarn here that I just couldn't leave behind. .03 ounces. Actually, That's not true because I flicked 0.03 ounces, so it's going to end up weighing a little bit less. But anyways, so once that's dry, then we can get down to doing our measurements and understanding exactly what you can expect to get from 1 ounce of raw fiber. Here we are at the moment of truth, which is how many yards and how many ounces did I get for this yarn. I'm also going to get the rags per inch so we have a better sense of the gauge. The yarn is now dry. You can see very characteristic of the wool from our sheep, this very high amount of elasticity and bounce. And so I measured it when it was hanging here wet and it was 26 inches. Now that it's dry and it's sort of shrunk up, it's measuring without any stretching at around 21. So it contracted by 5 inches in the drying process, so that kind of gives you an idea what I'm talking about when I talk about bloom. And the other thing I noticed is those ties that I thought I had so much room are all pretty much, you know, quite close to the yarn, quite compact. So not loose and floppy as they were before. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this calculation, and this is how I measured yardage. I literally count each strand in the skein. So what I do is I first measure what 1 full round would be. So here's the end of the yarn. Put it up here. It starts here. So I'm going to take that strand of yarn out of the ties. So there, now I can measure. That is the full distance. You can't see the bottom, but that's the full distance of 1 round. So I'm just going to get a rough estimate of that measurement. And by rough estimate, I'm just going to take my ruler here and see how long it is. So it is 47 inches total. 1 full round of the Niddy Noddy. I'm going to take off 3 inches. So 47 minus 3, 44 inches in 1 round. So 44 inches for my non-US friends, that's about 25.4 millimeters. There's 36 inches in 1 yard, which is how we measure distance of yarn. So 44 divided by 36, so 1.2, we're going to round down, 1.2 yards per round. And now I'm going to count the number of rounds I got. So there was that one. Sure, don't double dip. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28 rounds total. Plus my little insy-binsy mini skein here, which was that little bit that got left behind. And I did actually end up processing it anyway. Let's see what this ends up being. I'm going to give that 1.5. So 28.5 rounds. 28.5 rounds times 1.2 yards will give me the total yardage for this skein. I'm not going to attempt to do it in my head. Clear this 1.2 yards times 28.5. The answer is you can get 34 yards, 34.2 yards. In one skein, or in 1 ounce of raw fiber. So I'm just trying to think about that for a second. Normally when I spin an entire fleece, I'm going to get like 900 yards, is sort of what I estimate. So 900 yards. Divided by 34.2 is 26 ounce fleece, which is right around average. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that number. So in 1 ounce of raw fiber, you're going to get 34.2 yards of yarn. Let's go weigh this. Let's see what we lost in that final wash. I started with 1.04 raw fiber, and then I ended up at 0.65 after I washed it, plus I had plus 0.03 for that one little smidge that was left. So then I washed the yarn, it got to 0.42, so I flicked and spun the yarn. I flicked the wool, the washed wool, and I got 0.42 ounces, spun it into yarn, washed it again. So we're gonna get another weight, and this is gonna tell us what we lost in the washing of the yarn, if we lost any lanolin at all, because that would be pretty much all that would be left to lose, right? So let's get the weight. So here we are at the scale. Like that. Make sure it's level, make sure nothing is touching it. So what did I say? The wash wool was 0.42. The wash wool that I flipped up was 0.42. We added that extra little smidge, so now we're at 0.45. So you get 0.45 ounces from 1.04 ounces of raw fiber. I'm going to just get the wraps per inch just to give us a feel for what the gauge is, and then that's all the data that we were trying to find. So to get the wraps per inch, which is a way to determine the thickness of your yarn or your gauge, I have a Magicraft yarn gauge. This is something that's popular with Magicraft fans because it's just got the Magicraft logo on it and stuff. So same thing as when I measured the length of the yarn, I don't stretch it. I'm pretty careful not to stretch it. And when you do wraps per inch, I don't ever do this, so you probably wants better videos. Just really gently I wrap it around. I don't pull on it because that makes the yarn thinner. And I feel like you want the gauge to reflect what it would be when you knit something in its unstretched form, because it's not going to stay stretched, even though while you're knitting you might be pulling on the yarn a little bit, but once it's made into something, it's just going to sit there. So I'm just going to wrap it around here, nudge it over. I'm going to use my eyes to make sure that I'm not pushing it too far over so that it's a little distorted. I'm going to stop there. So I feel like that I could probably get one more wrap in there. I hate doing this. I'm going to put one more. So there's the 1 inch. Now all I got to do is count how many strands are on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oh my gosh, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So there it is, kind of just sitting there at noose. If I squished it over, I feel like you would get kind of a really bad answer. So I'm saying 13 wraps per inch. Now I'm going to go and check and see what that is in words. DK Sport Weight, which is what one of my very skilled knitter friends told me, that if she was going to characterize our yarn, our handspun yarn, that she would call it something like a DK Sport Weight. So 13 wraps per inch is what we got. So that's what you get. You get 0.45 ounces of a DK Sport Weight, 34.2 total yards from 1.04 ounces of raw fiber. There you go. So hey, thank you so much for sticking with me to the end here. I know this was a slog. This was kind of a slow video, good and ideal for my spinner friends out there and my knitter friends that like to watch things as they're working. But I really appreciate you checking in. If you would like to help support the farm, you can hit the like button. You can subscribe to my channel. You can comment. You can share the video with your friends and let them know this is available for them to enjoy. And honestly, just watching the video to the end really helps the farm a lot. That adds to my revenue for advertising. So thank you for that. I really appreciate you. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope you can come back soon.